Good evening, I'm Katie Wilson and thank you for joining us for this A News special. 2 years ago today, on October the 7th, Hamas launched a surprise and unprecedented assault on Israel, a day that would come to redefine the region's politics, its people and its future. Militants stormed across the border, killing and kidnapping hundreds. Israel's response was swift and devastating. What followed was months of relentless bombardment in Gaza, entire neighbourhoods reduced to rubble, hospitals overwhelmed, and a humanitarian crisis that drew global condemnation. The war reshaped alliances, split public opinion, and reignited debate over occupation, statehood, and security. Across capitals from Washington to Doha, diplomats scrambled to contain the fallout, yet 2 years on, peace remains elusive. Tonight, with fragile ceasefire talks now underway in Cairo as we speak, we look back at how the events of that day unfolded, the toll they've taken on both sides, and what the future might hold for Israelis, Palestinians, in a region still struggling to heal from the scars of October the 7th.
On the 7th of October 2023, thousands of people were celebrating at a music festival near Israel's border with Gaza when sirens rang out. Hamas stormed across the border, killing some 1,200 people and took 251 hostages. Within hours, Israel had declared war. Airstrikes pounded Gaza. Israel said it was targeting Hamas. Entire neighborhoods vanished in days. By November, more than 15,000 Palestinians had been killed, according to Gaza's Hamas-led health authority. The number of dead is now believed to amount to more than 60,000, and at least 550 aid workers have been killed, the highest toll in any conflict recorded by the Aid Worker Security Database. A brief ceasefire came in late November 2023, allowing aid in and some hostages out in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Lasting just 7 days, when it ended, Israel launched its ground invasion of southern Gaza. By early 2024, fighting had moved to Rafah. By spring, more than 1 million people had been displaced. The United Nations warned of famine. Israel expanded its military operations beyond Gaza, striking targets in Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and Yemen. Both Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Iran-aligned Houthi group in Yemen launched strikes on Israel in response. On the 27th of September 2024, Israeli bunker-busting bombs hit a Hezbollah complex in Beirut, killing Hassan Nasrallah, the group's leader of more than 30 years. His heir apparent, Hashem Safadin, was killed weeks later. Israel would also claim to kill Hamas leaders Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Diaf. A second three-stage ceasefire brokered by Egypt, Qatar and the United States came into effect in January 2025. Extensive Israel airstrikes resumed in mid-March. This year, the IPC Global Hunger Monitor declared famine in northern Gaza, saying that more than 500,000 people were at risk. Aid groups said Israel was restricting food and medicine. Israel accused Hamas of stealing supplies. Tel Aviv launched an airstrike on Qatar on the 9th of September 2025, claiming to be targeting top Hamas leaders. Qatar condemned the strike as cowardly and a violation of international law. Less than 2 weeks later, the UK, France and Canada were among countries to formally recognise a Palestinian state. The United States opposed the move. A US-led 20-point peace plan has proposed a ceasefire, hostage exchanges and a staged Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. Both sides are looking for clarity in the details.
Now, a total of 251 Israeli and foreign nationals were taken hostage when Hamas militants crossed into Israel during October the 7th. Most were freed during temporary ceasefires in 2023 and 2025, but dozens never made it home. Israeli officials believe 48 hostages remain in Gaza, but only 20 are thought to still be alive. Survivors have described harrowing conditions, from beatings and malnutrition to fear in Hamas underground tunnels. Some were moved frequently to evade detection, others left in total darkness for weeks. Well, 2 years after Hamas abducted him and his family, Israeli hostage Tal Shoham has returned to the ruins of his home in southern Israel. He describes the horror of that day and the months he spent in captivity, saying the peaceful community he once knew may never recover.
Standing in the ruins of his in-laws' home nearly 2 years after Hamas militants stormed into his community and abducted his family, Tal Shoham says the horror of October 7th, 2023 still lingers like a shadow that will never fade. The 44-year-old Israeli was among more than 250 people dragged into Gaza during the deadly Hamas-led assault. Returning to Kibbutz Be'eri in southern Israel, Shoham walks through the charred remains of the safe room where the nightmare began.
It's like entering a massive graveyard. All this neighborhood that once was so peaceful and beautiful is now like all destroyed.
A Hamas fighter fired repeatedly at the bulletproof window. Shoham knew it was only a matter of time before they would be forced to surrender.
So they walked me on the street, and to my right I saw two bodies that they executed. They weren't running or something, they just shot them in the head. I recognized the people, and we kept going, and they just threw me into a trunk of a car, and we started to go to Gaza.
There, he endured months of psychological and physical torment.
They tried to find many creative ways to torture us psychologically and physically. So, for example, they entered a few times and told us that one of us need to die, and we can choose who it will be. Or they want to shoot one of us, and we need to choose.
He spent the final stretch of his captivity deep underground in a suffocating tunnel, alongside 3 other hostages. Shoham spent 505 days in captivity before being freed in a prisoner exchange in February this year. His wife and children were released earlier. For Shoham, the physical scars are matched only by the emotional ones. Walking past banners of his murdered father-in-law, he admits the Be'eri he knew no longer exists, and neither does the hope he once had for peace.
The second anniversary of the October the 7th attacks has been marked in Israel with gatherings at the site of the Nova Music Festival, and in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. Joining us now from the Israeli capital is Blake Sifton.
On the second anniversary of the October 7th attacks that sparked the war in Gaza, there's a great deal of reflection as well as sadness in both Israel and Gaza on all that's been lost in the war. However, there is now hope that talks underway in Egypt could soon see the war come to an end. But there is still also anxiety. We've seen 2 ceasefires break down and the war resume throughout the 2 years of this conflict. And of course, there's been multiple ceasefire efforts that have come close to a breakthrough, only to evaporate at the last moment. In Israel, the October 7th attacks are still very much an open wound for many people, and they say that they won't be able to heal until all 48 hostages are returned home. Today, there have been commemorative events held across Israel to mark the October 7th attacks, but there's also been protests held outside the homes of government ministers, with demonstrators demanding that the government do everything they can to bring the hostages home. We also need to remember that this is the longest war Israel has ever fought. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers and reservists have served hundreds of days in both Gaza and Lebanon, and there are very high rates of burnout, PTSD, as well as suicide. Of course, in Gaza, there are no ceremonies today. The war is still raging and people are trying to survive. Local health officials say over 67,000 people have been killed over the last 2 years, including 18,000 children. Everyone in Gaza knows at least one person who has been killed. Most people have been displaced, sometimes multiple times. But with these talks underway in Egypt, there is now hope that the war could be ending soon. However, in these talks, there are still major obstacles that need to be overcome. Blake Sifton for A News in Tel Aviv.
A News spoke exclusively with the Israeli ambassador to Azerbaijan, who recounted the events of that day 2 years ago and offered his perspective on the prospects for peace building in the future.
And slowly, the news has started to flow, and we realize that we are under attack by thousands of Hamas terrorists who entered our communities and our kibbutzim and our cities, which are in the southern part of Israel. Civilians were murdered in their homes, children were abducted from their beds, elder people were butchered by terrorists, and the news were just incredible. And it took us some time to realize and to understand what we are dealing with. And for the military and for the security forces to regain their abilities and equipment and to be dispatched to the infected areas and to start to retaliate. The 7th of October is a day that every Israeli will remember. Every Israeli will remember exactly where he was, what was the impact on his own life, because we all know someone who was hurt and someone who was killed, and some families that were influenced by the atrocities of the 7th of October. The 7th of October has shown that forces and proxy forces like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like the Houthis are being supported by external forces such as Iran and others in order to bring to the destruction of Israel. And Israel has shown to the world that it has the capabilities to protect its civilians, to protect its defense, and to bring to the destruction of these terrorist proxy organizations which have projected a threat on its people and on its territory. Hezbollah doesn't exist in the same way they existed before. The regime in Syria doesn't exist the way it existed before. Iran has suffered tremendous attacks against its nuclear infrastructure and others, and has shown to the world that is not possessing the same strength as they believed beforehand. And the Houthis continue to attack Israel, but are experiencing the little force of Israel, which continues to attack its infrastructure, which possess a threat towards the state of Israel. There would not be any conflict resolution before these 48 hostages will be released. In the future, the only way for the Gaza and for the Palestinians who live in Gaza to have a future, a positive future, will be without the presence of Hamas in Gaza Strip. That is the only way that a positive future will reach to the Palestinians and also to Israel.
We also reached out to the Palestinian ambassador in Azerbaijan for their comments on the events of October the 7th, but have not received a response. Now, To better understand the conflict, it's important to look at Hamas. We take a closer look at the group's origins, its guiding ideology, and how its enduring conflict with Israel has influenced the modern Middle East.
What is Hamas? Formerly known as the Islamic Resistance Movement, the group was founded in 1987 during the First Palestinian Intifada, or uprising, against Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. Emerging from the Muslim Brotherhood, it combines political activity with armed resistance. The group is designated a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States, the European Union, Britain, Canada, and Japan, though it frames its armed operations as resistance against occupation. A political turning point came in 2006, when Hamas, running under the name Change and Reform, won the Palestinian parliamentary elections, defeating the dominant Fatah movement. The following year, after clashes with Fatah forces, Hamas seized full control of the Gaza Strip, splitting Palestinian governance between Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. Since then, Gaza has faced a strict Israeli and Egyptian blockade. Its population of over 2 million has endured multiple wars, causing widespread destruction and thousands of casualties. The biggest escalation in recent history occurred on October 7th, 2023, when Hamas launched a surprise and deadly attack inside Israel. The ensuing Israel-Hamas war has led to heavy Israeli bombardment in Gaza, where local authorities report over 65,000 Palestinian deaths and widespread famine. Hamas's armed wing, Al-Qassam Brigades, has carried out rocket attacks, suicide bombings, and other operations. Israel has targeted and killed several top Hamas figures. Hamas remains both a militant organization and a political authority in Gaza, shaping the ongoing conflict with Israel. To Palestinians, it can represent armed resistance, but to much of the international community, it is seen as a group responsible for violence and instability. Hamas seeks the recognition of Palestinian claims over historic Palestine. The group maintains that any ceasefire or negotiation must address prisoner releases, Israeli border crossings, and the lifting of blockades, and it frames these demands as non-negotiable for long-term peace.
After 2 years of war, there is a chance of a deal aimed at ending the fighting in Gaza, with mediators saying they have reached an understanding with both Hamas and Israel on the agenda and mechanisms for the talks. The talks are based on President Trump's Gaza peace plan, with officials saying negotiations are expected to last several days. Mediators from the United States, Egypt and Qatar are facilitating these indirect talks, applying pressure on both sides to reach a deal. The outcome of these discussions could prove critical not only for ending hostilities in Gaza, but also for ensuring the region's stability. Joining us to discuss this is Middle East analyst Lamiz Jadid. Thank you for being with us. Now, this is the closest both sides have come to a deal since the war began 2 years ago. How optimistic are you that we'll see a resolution in the coming days?
Yes, having all what's been put at the table now in front of the Arabs first, and second, the 20-point proposal from Mr. Trump that many Arab countries believe that it was in a way changed by Mr. Netanyahu when he proposed the negotiation with the last negotiation that was supposed to happen in Doha. So yes, I think I could have some hope if trust was really also engaged in the process, because many parties now, they don't consider the United States as an honest broker when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think Arab League also, that happened 2 days ago, a few days ago, it did not come with so much result. as it was expected from Arab leaks. But I think this time there is more serious steps were taken by all parties, precisely because I think also Trump, he wants to finish now, before his midterm, he wants to finish this really big problem for his American public first, the world also in total. They want to finish this before they could maybe move into another hotspot that might be Iran next time, while we all know on the 18th of October, the JCPOA will be not valid anymore.
So if we look back
I
on the past 2 years, what are the key moments that have shaped these negotiations and as you mentioned, perhaps broken the trust between these two sides and these mediators?
The thing that since 2 years, all the attempt to have any negotiation have been cut by the Israeli party mainly. And I mean, we saw recently what happened in Qatar. It was just a direct evidence that Israeli does not want really to go for negotiation. And Mr. Netanyahu, I said, I'll not say all Israeli, there are families who are waiting for their children to come back home, and the public opinion in Israel is just it's just one thing in mind: to stop this war and to have the hostage back. But it seems Mr. Netanyahu has other advantage of prolonging this war because of his personal gain maybe from this. And then, yes, we noticed many attempts, 2 times negotiation that's been failed. Not because of the Palestinian side. It was really, they were opened. Even the Arab, they supported any peace process. And we know that Arabs from 2002, they proposed a peace deal with Israel based on both state, Israel and Palestine's security and having the 2 states, but Israel also refused this proposal. So there is not so much trust,
Israel
not
had
only with
accepted
the American,
this
but
proposal, and it's Hamas we're waiting for, isn't it, to accept this?
Listen, I cannot take their side for the time being. I can read the events. I think after reading few interviews from the Palestinian leadership in Ramallah mainly, I understood that for Palestinians, it's very essential first to have guarantees that there will be a pullback, military pullback from Gaza, quick one, and also guaranteed of not restarting the war again. Nobody spoke about it. This is one very important point in the 22 points of Mr. Trump. And the second part also, there was no mentioning at all to anything regarding the West Bank. And this is also another big question mark. And we all know that just yesterday there was an attack over 30 villages in the West Bank, and people were being taken out of their homes, and more settlers are taking places. And there is the E1 also settlements in East Jerusalem that also might cut completely the West Bank into 2 other pieces. So we are not speaking from the Palestinian point of view, we are not speaking about a peace agreement. We are speaking about another colonization structure that might lead to another disorder in the region.
And who do you think is in the stronger negotiating position here?
I think both parties now have they hope to stop this fighting. I'm not speaking about Mr. Netanyahu himself or about his party, extreme right party. I'm speaking about Israel has passed the longest war that they have been through until today. America also, it has many pressure from within. Now we know that even the young conservatives in the right in America, they are going against Israel and against all American policy supporting Israel. Israel is really, there is a turning in the mood when it comes to Israel in the whole world. So of course, the Palestinian now, we know that they are suffering from daily massacre. It's a genocide, as the UN documentize all this killing. So we have evidence that both parties have now have been tired, maybe, or maybe decide that this is the time to stop this conflict. We hope it will be the end of the killing and of the suffering in this part of the world.
And if Hamas does reject this deal, Trump has promised his full backing for Israel to go ahead and destroy Hamas. What do you make of this? How concerned are you about this?
It's early to decide that Hamas will refuse this deal. I think the negotiation is still going on, and I think the main points, the main concerns for the Palestinians needs to be taken in consideration. Of course, where is the guarantees that after tomorrow the Israeli will not restart again? What's the guarantee that they will not pull out of their military presence? What's the guarantee for the Western Bank also just not to continue this settlement program? I think there are people, many countries who are concerned now in the Middle East. They are not concerned about only what's happening in Gaza, but about their own national security. And this is, I'm talking about Jordan, Egypt, all the Gulf states now, they have other calculation when it comes to their national security. So this negotiation, it's not taking in consideration only the what's happening in Gaza Strip or the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It's also a solution that might calm down all players, all neighboring countries as well.
Thank you very much for joining us on this special edition and for providing your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in August this year, the World Health Organization reported that more than 500,000 people in Gaza are trapped in famine marked by widespread starvation, destitution and preventable deaths. Here's a glimpse into the life of one mother in Gaza raising twins who have known nothing but war.
Uday and Hamza Abu Oda are almost 2 years old. They were born in Gaza on November 2nd, 2023, less than a month after the war began. Since that day, their world has been tense and rubble. Their mother, Iman Abdul Halim Abu Mutlaq, remembers walking to the hospital alone when labor began.
I went to Nasser Hospital on foot to give birth. I went down the stairs. I was in labor. My water broke and there was no one to look after me. No one. I called my husband. He came and we walked together. There was no transportation to take me to the hospital, so we walked there. Within less than 5 minutes, I gave birth.
At that time, Gaza's hospitals were overcrowded. Israel had cut off most supplies and the wounded filled the corridors. Iman gave birth among the noise of gunfire and funeral processions. She had to walk back to the shelter the same day, carrying 2 newborns in her arms. By the end of that week, Gaza's health authorities said that more than 9,000 people had been killed. 8 months later, in July 2024, her husband Ayman was killed by shrapnel.
My husband went to look for shelter for his children. I mean, food for his children. His 10 children. We were hungry. There was nothing at all. When he went outside, a shrapnel hit his neck and he was martyred immediately. What was his fault?
Since his death, Iman has cared for 10 children on her own. The family has fled 4 times. There was no baby formula and barely any food. Sometimes Iman fed the twins bread dipped in herbal tea to quiet their hunger. She also had to cut old cloth into makeshift diapers and bathe the twins in a single plastic bucket. Clean water was, and still is, scarce, and both boys fell ill repeatedly. Doctors say the twins are underweight and slow to develop. Their sister Hala, now 20, spent her days caring for them while her mother searches for aid. For the last 2 years, the boys have woken up to the same sounds they were born into: the buzzing of drones, shouting in the camps, and the thud of distant strikes.
Joining us now from Amman is Middle East analyst Daoud Khattab. Thank you for being with us. Now, not only are we marking 2 years since the October 7th attack, but this is 2 years of war in Gaza. What's your assessment of the mood among Palestinians today?
Well, you know, the big problem we have is that most people think that conflict between Israel and Palestine began in October 7th, 2023. It actually began 25 years earlier. The mood now is very sad. People are very sad at how the genocide has gone on for a long time without being stopped. And they're hopeful now with the Trump plan that this would end the hemorrhage, the death, and the killing every single day, even after President Trump said that there would be stopping. They called on Israel to stop the bombing. Still, every day we open the news and there's 10, 15, 20, 50 people who are being killed every single day. That's a really war crime that needs to stop, because these are innocent civilians that are being killed, and women and children are bearing the biggest cost of this war on Gaza.
And as you mentioned, talks are underway in Egypt at the moment. Israel has agreed to Trump's proposal, while Hamas has accepted some but not all of the conditions. How likely do you think it is that Hamas will accept this deal?
Well, I think the deal is a framework, and I think both Israel and Hamas, as well as the rest of the world, accepted the framework. But God is in the details, and the details are where some problems will happen. How far Israel will withdraw, which Palestinians will be released, because Israel has a veto on some of the Palestinians, like the leader Marwan Barghouti and others, and who's going to ensure that after the hostages are released, that Israel will actually continue to carry out its promise to withdraw. These are issues that need support, and as your colleague from Lishbona said, there's a big problem with trust. People don't trust the Americans, they don't trust the Israelis after the killing of negotiators in Doha. So there is a trust problem, but it's good that Hamas has agreed to the framework, and hopefully they will also find solutions between them and the Israelis. You know, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, all supporting the peace treaty or the peace offer by Trump. And I think they will put support to making sure that Israel lives up to its side of the deal, and that Hamas also releases the prisoners.
And another key sticking point here is the future governance of Gaza. How do you envisage that? Another issue there is the future governance of Gaza. So the future governance of Gaza is another key issue. How do you envisage that?
Well, there are optimists and pessimists. The optimists say that the delegation running Gaza will be made up of Palestinians, and therefore we have nothing to worry about because they are fellow Palestinians. The pessimists say this is a colonial rule, that Tony Blair and Donald Trump will rule Gaza. I trust the Palestinian people will not allow anybody to colonialize their country anymore, but it will take time. I think it's going to be a big and long process until we have a Palestinian state.
And on that note, the Saudis have said that peace cannot happen without a clear and irreversible path to an independent Palestinian state. But Netanyahu has repeated his pledge that Palestinians would never get a state. Is it too soon, or can we be having that conversation about Palestinian statehood?
You know, in September, we had a number of important countries, including the last colonial power, Britain, in Palestine, recognizing the state of Palestine on the June 4th, 1967 borders. This means that we are in the process of reaching more than 80% of the world UN member states who recognize Palestine. It's very difficult for Israel and America to stop the tsunami of world support for Palestinians. Sooner or later, people will pressure their own governments to ensure that the Palestinian state is actually born and has control over its own land alongside of Israel. I mean, we understand that Israel has its own security needs and Palestinians have their own security needs. So we need to find a solution that ensures Palestinians are democratic and free and independent and sovereign on their own land, and that there is a peace agreement between Palestine and Israel.
And I want to come back to a point you mentioned about Tony Blair there. What do you make of him as a choice? Is he the right man for this job?
Well, nobody asked our opinion, so it's hard to answer a question. No, we prefer to have a Palestinian leader, but you know, I think as a transition between the Hamas rule and an independent Palestinian state, we understand that there has to be some kind of an international role. In fact, we would love to see this international role in the West Bank and not just Gaza, because we want to have a separation and an accountability to the Jewish settlers in the West Bank. So yes, as a transition between Israeli occupation and Palestinian statehood, there is a decolonization process, and there is a need for international Arab and Muslim power to be in Palestine to ensure that everybody is held accountable to their promises.
And how hopeful are you that we are going to see some kind of resolution or agreement in the coming days as these talks are underway as we speak?
I'm cautiously optimistic because I think the whole world is tired of the war. Certainly Palestinians are tired, the Israeli people are tired. America is trying to help Israel climb down the tree that they've climbed. The Israeli public opinion around the world is terrible. And so I think there is many reasons to think that this particular time and the energy that President Trump seems to be putting into making sure that this deal will work. I think there's enough energy from the Arab and Muslim countries who met Trump and their leaders to ensure that this agreement is carried out to its fullest.
And what do you make of Trump as a peacemaker? Do you trust his administration to get this deal done?
You know, I'm not sure that he is a peacemaker. I think he's looking for a Nobel Peace Prize and he's doing what he has to do. But I also think he is doing the favor to the Israelis because the Israelis are losing a lot of support. But nevertheless, you know, if there is peace out of this, we have to give him credit. If he's able to put enough pressure on the Israelis to end their occupation and allow a Palestinian state, then yes, he would deserve credit.
Thank you very much for providing your insight and for joining us on the programme.
Okay.
Joining us now from Jerusalem is political analyst Nia Bonds. Now, thank you for being with us. Now, as I mentioned, you're joining us from Jerusalem. Can you talk us through the mood in the city and in Israel today?
Look, it's a very bittersweet day. This is a holiday, just like it was 2 years ago, the festival of Sukkot. October 7, 2 years ago, the very last day of the holiday was October 7. This time it's the very first day of the holiday. That has to do with just the way the calendar works and the lunar calendar. So on the one hand, we have an attempt to create some festivity because that's what holidays are about. And on the other hand, it's all wrapped in memory and introspection. And I would also say with some hope. I just heard the previous speaker speaking a little bit about that too. Hope that perhaps we were not going to have the third year of October 7 in the middle of a war.
And what have we been hearing from the hostage families and some of the released hostages today?
we've been hearing a lot, and we've been hearing many stories. As anniversaries have a tendency to create some reflections. You heard people who were going to the south. Many took their cars and went and visited the various memorials that have been a part of October 7th. There are many of them. And when we're talking about the places where people were shot, shelters that became very quickly death traps. And some of the families of the hostages did the same thing. They went with the rest of the people of Israel. They wanted to connect. Of course, we've had one of the largest rallies in Tel Aviv just the day before, pushing the negotiation team and calling for the release of all hostages. A big part of the emerging deal is pending on the release of the hostages, something that really just about everyone in Israel in the last 2 years were praying for.
And of course, 2 years on, and there's still 48 hostages in Gaza. Can Netanyahu's government look back and call its efforts to return them so far a success?
Netanyahu's government can call anything it will do a success. That's the nature of politics. There are plenty of others in Israel who would say that perhaps we've had other chances and other opportunities to seal a deal earlier. We have tried that a number of times, and I don't think it was all about the Israeli government, but that's connected to a much broader discussion about what had happened here in the past 2 years. Netanyahu is now trying to argue that this particular agreement is the best possible results to address the goals of the war. And he attempts to present this as a victory, but of course it's not yet sealed. The signatures, the signals from Cairo are somewhat encouraging, but of course Hamas has some of their own reservations, and eventually we need to meet. It's not in midway, at least at the point where the two parties and the mediators are able to agree. And here, this is not about just Israel and Hamas. It's really about a number of other stakeholders that are about to play a very different role than the role they've played in the past in the Gaza Strip.
In staying on the hostage families, how are they feeling about Netanyahu and his efforts to return their family members?
If you were a family of a hostage, if you were a mother or a wife, I think that you would say that there was not enough done to get the hostages out. From the point of view of the hostages, they would like to get their family members home. They wanted to do that from the very first moment, and that has been the most important issue on their agenda. And in many ways it is, but it's not the only issue, because we're dealing with the future of Gaza, we're dealing with the presence of Hamas, we're dealing with security arrangements that created October 7th and created this scenario, and we cannot create another reality in where 5 years or 10 years down the road we're seeing the same thing. So for the hostages family, none of this was enough. I think for many in Israel, none of this was enough. 2 years in captivity, and we have heard from many of the hostages that came back. I know some of them personally. These are very, very, very difficult stories. Many of them are traumatized. Many of them have lost not just years and times, but they've lost their ability to really readjust to life. But if you take this broader circle, how many other lives were lost in the process of getting these hostages released and in the process of this war? So for many, I think this is certainly far from enough. But still, we're all praying and joining the prayer that that's going to be the end of it. And I think many of us in Israel and in the Middle East probably will agree that we need a different chapter here and we need a different year, and we don't want to celebrate another holiday here in Israel in the shadow of a war.
And from your perspective as an analyst, how hopeful are you that these current talks that are underway in Egypt, how hopeful are you that they'll see the release of hostages in the coming days?
The release of hostages is a big part of this. It's not going to go without the release of the hostages. But I think that at this point, there is a real pressure by all the stakeholders involved to really put an end to this war. At some point, we should have put an end to this war. Wars start and wars needs to end. There is a very significant price that was paid by both sides when it comes to this particular war. And with the hostages that were left, and we believe that there are 20 of them who are alive, who were able to somehow survive the constant bombing and very dire conditions, and often the way they were treated too, and supplies of food and other things. It's something that should end. And I believe that there's a chance that it can happen, because for many of us here, not just in Israel, we've had enough. And we very much understand that this war has come to a phase where we can try to bring a different dynamic and create a different future, and bring a future not just for the hostages and the people from the Israeli side, but also from the Palestinian side. We all need a different start. So I was saying that we all need a different start, and that's why there is a degree of hope that all the stakeholders that are pushing all the different sides to come to terms and begin a new chapter. And it still is not an easy thing, because the chapter that we need to begin is not just about sorting a particular crisis now. It's about sorting a reality that's not going to bring us to the next crisis, because what we have seen here, certainly since Hamas have taken over Gaza, and just to remind you and the viewers, that the Gaza Strip was actually given to the Palestinians.
Now let's stay on these current negotiations. And Netanyahu, he's repeatedly talked about total victory in this war. What does that look like for Netanyahu?
Look, this war has a number of stated goals, and it is about bringing the hostages back, and it's about ending the Hamas control over the Gaza Strip, dismantling Hamas from weapons, and creating a different order. For Netanyahu, the ultimate victory is about the defeat of Hamas, and he would need to say to his government and to the Israeli electorate, who probably will need to judge this in the next election cycle, that Hamas was indeed defeated and Hamas is not going to come back to Gaza. This is why these negotiations very much focused on how Gaza is going to be managed and how we're going to make sure that the weapon that Hamas still possesses will be dismantled or handed to a different party, and that Hamas is not going to have influence in the new structure in Gaza. And that's, of course, something that Hamas does not necessarily see eye to eye, although there is some indication that they're willing to do something within the context of a broader Palestinian move. Netanyahu does not want to see the Palestinian Authority taking a role in this as well, which is a separate issue from Hamas. And the emerging formula is one that will allow Arab leadership along with a Palestinian involvement, and that will be vague enough so that Netanyahu will be able to say that on the one hand he was able to get Hamas out of Gaza and fulfill the goals of the war, and for him he would say this is the total victory, and the Palestinians may be able to say that from their perspective they were able to release prisoners and they were able to get more support for a Palestinian state, and therefore they can begin a phase of reconstruction that is, not sure if it's a total victory, but at least it's something that they can present for this particular chapter, and then allow us to move on and begin to write perhaps a new chapter and a better one when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Now, my final question, what about the Israeli public? You mentioned them there. Do they trust Netanyahu to lead the country and to secure peace?
Netanyahu won the last election, and he did that in the shadow of many who had came to demonstrate against him, and it was a tight victory. The recent public polls had shown that Netanyahu lost support, and that if there's going to be elections now, there's a very good chance that that he would be challenged. But of course, that has to do with the way politics works here, and also with the way this deal will work here. If Netanyahu will be able to show that this particular deal and the hostages who are coming back home, it may give him some political impetus or also some political gains, for the future. There are many people in Israel, just like in many other countries in the world, who would like to see a different leadership. Netanyahu have been there for 2 decades, and I think many here feel that this has been long enough, and that Netanyahu can certainly finish its term and move. There are many people who say that that anyone who has been involved in the atrocities of October 7th, certainly the person at the helm, Netanyahu, they do not need to continue to lead the country. Many people have already left, have taken responsibility. Netanyahu have not done so. And the next election cycle will see the judgment call of the Israeli public.
Thank
Netanyahu certainly have seen a lot of
you very
opposition.
much for joining us on the programme and for providing your insights there.
Thank you.
Let's bring you some more information now coming from Egypt. Hamas says its delegation is seeking to overcome all obstacles to achieving an agreement as indirect negotiations for a peace deal with Israel continue. A spokesperson for the group lists its key aspirations from the talks in Sharm el-Sheikh as a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire, complete withdrawal of the Israeli army from all areas of the Gaza Strip, unrestricted entry of humanitarian and relief aid, ensuring that displaced people are able to return to their homes, the immediate start of a comprehensive reconstruction process under the supervision of a Palestinian national body of technocrats, the conclusion of a fair prisoner exchange deal. And we can also bring you some lines from US President Donald Trump, who said his country is going to do everything possible to ensure a deal is adhered to by both sides. When asked by reporters on what guarantees is Washington giving Arab partners that Israel will not resume its offensive after the hostages are released, he had this to say.
Our guarantee is once this deal happens, if it does happen, look, they're in negotiations right now, we are going to do everything possible. We have a lot of power, and we're going to do everything possible to make sure everybody adheres to the deal. Okay?
Well, thank you for joining us for this special programme. We will continue to bring you the latest developments and the news around the world and beyond. Stay with us.